I shot 3 bullets into the air while shouting, "This is private property. Get out now, or the next one's gonna be lower." The look on Victor Gates's face went from arrogance to pure terror in seconds. I never thought my peace out here on the Texas hills would end with guys in suits storming my ranch on a rainy night. But when it comes to my land, there's no half measure. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get more stories like this. 15 years as a Marine taught me 2 things: to value freedom and to defend what's mine. My name is James Miller. I'm 45, and after 3 long missions in the Middle East, all I wanted was a piece of land to call my own. I saved every penny of my military pay to buy these 10 acres in the rural Texas hills. It's nothing extraordinary for anyone passing by: a modest 2-bedroom house, a renovated barn I use as a garage and workshop, a small shooting range in the back, and plenty of open space. My daily routine is simple and predictable, just the way I like it. I wake up at sunrise, have coffee on the porch while watching the first golden rays hit the ancient oaks around the property. I take care of my daily chores, fixing fences, working on my '95 Ford F-150, and doing target practice a few times a week. At night, I sit in my rocking chair with a book or watch documentaries. No nosy neighbors, no HOA meetings, and no arbitrary rules about grass height. The peace lasted until that Monday in April. When I opened the mailbox, I found an official envelope with the Maple Hills Homeowners Association logo. Inside was a letter telling me I was breaking several HOA rules. Inadequate grass height, non-compliant vehicle parked in sight, unapproved structure at the back of the property. It ended by demanding immediate compliance and warning of a $350 fine. Confused, I read the document several times. Maple Hills was a luxury community built 2 years ago, about a kilometer away from my place. I never signed any contract with them. My ranch existed long before those cookie-cutter mansions appeared. I tossed the letter in the trash and went about my day. 3 days later, a black BMW pulled up in front of my house. A tall guy with graying hair got out, accompanied by a stern-looking woman. While I was chopping wood, they came over with barely hidden disapproval on their faces. "Mr. Miller? I'm Victor Gates, president of the Maple Hills Homeowners Association, and this is Eleanor Bloom, our compliance officer." I set my axe on a log and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "How can I help you?" "We're here to talk about the violations mentioned in our letter," Eleanor said in a tone more suited to scolding a kid. "It looks like you haven't taken any action." "I haven't because I'm not even a member of your association." Victor smiled condescendingly. "There's been a recent expansion of Maple Hills jurisdiction. Your property is now within our community limits." "That's impossible. I never signed anything. The new municipal guidelines let us incorporate adjacent properties to maintain the region's aesthetic," Victor replied as he handed me a folder. "Here's the documentation. You have 30 days to get your property in order or the fines will go up." I took the papers, but didn't even need to examine them closely. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but my property is private and not subject to your rules. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do." Eleanor huffed indignantly. "Mr. Miller, we're not asking. The HOA has legal authority and, on my property, the only authority is me." I interrupted as I handed back the folder. "Have a good day." As they headed back to the car, I heard Victor mutter, "Typical. But he'll learn. Everyone learns." The following week, the letters started piling up. New fines for hostile behavior toward HOA reps and continued noncompliance followed. Then came the surprise visits. I caught Eleanor photographing my shooting range while I was in town for supplies. When confronted, she just said she was documenting violations. The last straw came when the police showed up at my door. A young officer explained they had gotten reports of gunfire in a residential area. I explained that I had a perfectly legal shooting range on private, rural land. The officer, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, took my info and left. I realized I needed to defend myself strategically. That very night, I installed security cameras covering every angle of the property and hired Sophia Carter, a lawyer who specializes in real estate law. She confirmed my suspicions. The so-called jurisdiction expansion was nothing more than an illegal maneuver. The tension kept building day after day. I received a notice saying my internet would be cut off due to an unauthorized satellite dish installation. Ridiculous, since the dish had been on my property since I moved in. The next day, as predicted, I was offline. I called the provider, and after an hour on hold, they told me the order came from a so-called local zoning authority, clearly the HOA pretending to be a government agency. Reporting the incident to Sophia only confirmed our suspicions that Victor and his crew were abusing their power, trying to force me into submission by sheer exhaustion. "Keep documenting everything," she advised. "They're digging their own legal grave." The escalation continued when Eleanor started approaching delivery folks and occasional visitors on my property, warning them about code violations and hazardous conditions. I even found a sticker slapped on my mailbox declaring the property under compliance investigation. I ripped the sticker off and added the incident to my growing file of harassment. One Tuesday, while fixing the fence at the back, I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery. I ran out to see a small tractor and two men in construction helmets near my shooting range. A third man was supervising, looking over a plan. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted as I quickly approached. The supervisor calmly turned. "We're here to remove this unauthorized structure, sir." "Who authorized this?" I asked, stepping between the tractor and my range. "Maple Hills HOA. We have demolition orders for code violations." He handed me a document with the HOA letterhead. "This isn't a court order. You're trespassing on private property," I declared as I pulled out my cell phone. "Get out now, or I'll call the police for trespassing." The workers exchanged nervous glances. "We're just doing our job, sir," one muttered. "Your job doesn't include demolishing someone else's property without legal authority. Now, please remove that equipment from my land." The supervisor made a quick call, and minutes later, a familiar BMW appeared on the access road. Victor Gates stepped out, adjusting his expensive blazer as he walked toward me like he owned the place. "Mr. Miller, I see you're hindering our compliance team's authorized work. You have no authority here, Victor. This is a private ranch that never belonged to your community. I'm asking one last time, remove your men and equipment from my property." Victor smiled, the kind of smile honed through years of corporate power. "I'm afraid you don't understand the situation. The HOA now has jurisdiction over this area. If you keep obstructing us, you'll face serious legal consequences." I stood my ground. "You're bluffing. My lawyer already confirmed that this jurisdiction expansion is completely illegal. Now I'm recording this conversation as evidence of trespassing and attempted property damage." The mention of recording made Victor pause. "That's a mistake, Miller. We have the municipality and influence on our side. I have the law on my side. And if that machine isn't off my property in the next 5 minutes, I'll call not only the police, but also get a restraining order against you and the entire HOA board." Victor signaled his team to pull back, but before leaving, he came close and whispered, "You chose the wrong enemy. I've dealt with guys like you before, ex-military types who think the rules don't apply to them. They all end up bowing down. Don't count on it," I replied. That night, I couldn't sleep. Adrenaline still pulsed through my veins, mixing with old combat memories I thought I had left behind. I beefed up my surveillance, adding more cameras and setting up a perimeter alert system. Sophia advised me to file a police report, which I did the next morning. The officer taking my statement looked bored, as if it were just another neighbor dispute, until I showed him the footage of the demolition attempt. "This is serious, Mr. Miller," he said, his tone shifting. "I'm going to file this as attempted property damage and trespassing." 2 weeks passed without direct incidents, though I noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked along the main road, watching my entrance. I also got formal notices of lawsuits for obstructing HOA authority and threatening behavior toward community officials. Sophia assured me those were baseless intimidations, but the emotional toll was real. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. The weather was harsh, with thunder rumbling over the hills. I'd just finished dinner when my security system went off. On the monitor, I saw 3 vehicles stopping at the start of my driveway: Victor's BMW, a black SUV, and a utility van. 6 men got out, all dressed in dark uniforms except Victor, who wore his usual blazer now over a raincoat. I grabbed my Remington rifle and positioned it near the door, but out of sight. When heavy knocks sounded at the front door, I took a deep breath, hit record on my phone, and answered. Victor stood there soaking wet, but still with that arrogant smile. "Mr. Miller, sorry for the late visit, but official HOA business doesn't wait for the weather." "What's the purpose of this visit, Victor?" I asked, blocking the entrance. "We're here to post formal code violation notices on your property and conduct a full inspection. These gentlemen are security guards hired to make sure our procedures aren't obstructed again." The security guards looked more like hired mercenaries than professional community security. I even noticed bulletproof vests under their dark uniforms. "You have no legal authority to inspect my property. We've been through this before," I said. Victor sighed dramatically. "I really hoped we could settle this civilly, but your stubbornness forces us to take stronger measures." He handed me a plastic folder. "Here's the final documentation incorporating your property into Maple Hill's jurisdiction, along with a forfeiture notice for unresolved cumulative violations. You have 48 hours to leave voluntarily." I took the folder, opened it, and laughed out loud. "This isn't a court document, Victor. It's an HOA letter with fancy legal language. Laugh while you can, Miller. From today on, this property is under Maple Hill's HOA control. My men will now begin their inspection." 2 security guards started moving toward the door. That's when I grabbed my Remington rifle, stepped back 2 paces, and raised it. "This is private property. You weren't invited, and you don't have a court order. Consider this your final warning." Victor paled but maintained his stance. "This is criminal intimidation with a firearm. Our lawyers will." I pointed the rifle to the sky and fired 3 quick shots. The bang echoed through the hills, mixing with the distant thunder. "This is private property. Get out now, or the next one's gonna be lower," I shouted with every bit of strength in my lungs. The security guards immediately backed off. The arrogance on Victor's face crumbled, replaced by pure, raw fear. When I saw he wasn't moving, I deliberately pointed the rifle at the ground just inches from his expensive Italian shoes and fired again. The blast kicked up mud all over his clothes. "Now!" I yelled. They bolted instantly. Victor nearly tripped as he dashed to his car, while the guards practically trampled each other trying to reach their vehicles. I watched them speed away, headlights swaying wildly on the bumpy road. My heart was pounding, an all too familiar rush of post-battle adrenaline. I called Sophia immediately, and then the police to report the incident. "Keep the recording safe," Sophia instructed. "That just changed everything." 2 hours later, officers arrived to record my version of the events. I showed them the security footage that captured the whole interaction. One of the older officers watched with a grave expression. "Mr. Miller, I understand you were defending your property, but firing a gun during a civil dispute is tricky, even in Texas." "Officer, they invaded my property after previous attempts at property damage. They came with uniformed men in bulletproof vests. I was worried for my safety." He nodded slowly. "I'll document everything. But be prepared. This is likely more than just a neighbor dispute now." He was right. The next morning, 2 detectives came with an arrest warrant for aggravated assault with a firearm. I was taken in for questioning but released without bail thanks to my clean record and full cooperation. The HOA machine worked fast. That afternoon, local headlines screamed, "Ex-Marine threatens HOA president with rifle." Victor knew how to play the media. Interviews painted him as an exemplary citizen trying to maintain community standards against a disturbed, potentially dangerous veteran. Meanwhile, Sophia worked tirelessly, preparing our defense and a major countersuit for harassment, attempted illegal appropriation, psychological damage, and property rights violations. "They made a grave mistake by escalating to this level," she explained. "Now we have solid evidence of organized intimidation." As the trial date approached, the threats stopped completely. The HOA's silence was deafening, and far scarier than their earlier threats. Sophia assured me it was a sign they were regrouping and preparing their legal strategy. "Get ready," she warned. "They're going to paint you as an unstable veteran with violent tendencies. They'll use your military record against you." "Let them try," I replied. "I've got the truth and the recordings on my side." The day of the trial arrived under a clear blue sky, a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside me. The county courthouse was an imposing red brick building, the kind that seems to have witnessed more history than all its occupants combined. I adjusted my tie, a rarity in my wardrobe, while Sophia went over our final notes on a wooden bench in the corridor. "Remember," she said, "stay calm no matter what they say. Victor's going to try to provoke you and make you look out of control." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Got it." The courtroom was surprisingly packed. I noticed several Maple Hills faces, probably hand-picked by Victor to show community support. On the other side, I saw a few of my local friends and, surprisingly, several rural property owners from nearby who had faced similar issues with the HOA expansion. Victor was dressed impeccably, chatting animatedly with his lawyer, a gray-haired man in a suit that probably cost more than my car. Eleanor Bloom sat stiffly in the back, casting barely concealed looks of disdain my way. When Judge Peterson entered, a black man in his 60s, with an expression that revealed nothing, the room quieted. The initial procedures passed in a blur, introductions, oaths, and judicial formalities that Sophia had prepared me for. Victor's lawyer, Richard Townsend, opened the case with a carefully constructed narrative. I was a veteran with possible untreated PTSD, resistant to community civility, and, more importantly, had threatened respectable citizens with a firearm while they were doing their legitimate duties. "Your Honor," he concluded gravely, "Mr. Miller represents a danger to our peaceful community. His actions show a disregard for established authorities and a propensity for violence when challenged." When Sophia stood up for our opening statement, I felt a renewed confidence. She wasn't just competent, she was brilliant. "Your Honor," she began, "this case isn't about a problematic veteran. It's about a private organization that, without any legal authority, systematically tried to intimidate, harass, and eventually take away Mr. Miller's legally acquired property." Then she presented our documented timeline. Every letter from the HOA, each unauthorized visit, the demolition attempts, the service cuts, and finally the nighttime invasion by armed security. "Mr. Miller didn't act as an aggressor. He acted the way any Texas ranch owner would when confronted by intruders on his property at night. He exercised his right to defend his property with reasonable force after multiple peaceful requests for them to leave. The evidence started piling up. Victor's lawyer called witnesses, HOA members, who described my property as an eyesore in the community, a threat to property values, and me as hostile and uncooperative. Eleanor testified about my threatening behavior, describing me as unhinged and dangerously unpredictable. When it was my turn to testify, I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Sophia had told me to speak honestly and without defensiveness. "Mr. Miller," Townsend asked during cross-examination, "do you think it was appropriate to point a firearm at unarmed civilians?" "I didn't point my gun directly at anyone," I replied calmly. "I fired warning shots into the sky and one shot toward the ground, away from the intruders, after they refused to leave my property." "Intruders?" "Mr. Gates and his team were just inspecting a property under HOA jurisdiction. My property was never under the legal jurisdiction of the HOA. They showed up at night with men in bulletproof vests after previous attempts at property damage. I took that as a threat." Townsend smirked condescendingly. "Don't you think your military experience might have distorted your perception of the situation? Confusing an administrative visit with a hostile threat?" I kept my cool, remembering Sophia's advice. "My military experience taught me exactly how to assess threats clearly. I can tell the difference between an administrative visit and 6 men invading my property at night with tactical gear." The turning point came when Sophia presented our key evidence, the full, unedited security footage showing every interaction with the HOA, culminating in the nighttime invasion. The room fell silent as we watched the sequence of events, Victor clearly stating he was taking my property, the security guards advancing without legal authorization, and my clear warning before firing. The video proved beyond doubt that the shots were fired away from people, as a deterrent, not as an act of aggression. I watched Judge Peterson frown, especially during the scenes where Victor declared the property belonged to the HOA. When the lights came back on, the judge called for a 10-minute recess. When we returned, Sophia presented our countersuit with documents that conclusively proved that my property was never legally incorporated into the HOA's jurisdiction. She showed us the original records, highlighting that the expansion Victor mentioned was completely fabricated. Even more devastating was when she called Greg Simmons, the former HOA's secretary who had resigned months earlier, to testify. "Mr. Simmons, why did you leave your position with Maple Hills HOA?" Sophia asked. He hesitated, glancing briefly at Victor. "I had ethical disagreements with the leadership." "Could you elaborate?" "Mr. Gates implemented what he called an aggressive expansion strategy. The goal was to incorporate adjacent properties into the community to boost home values and, well, increase the HOA's revenue through fees and fines." "Did this expansion have any legal basis?" "No. It was just a strategy of pressure and intimidation. The idea was to make life so difficult for independent property owners that eventually they'd either sell or have to submit to the rules." Victor's face turned red with fury. His lawyer tried to discredit Simmons by suggesting there was personal resentment, but the damage was already done. The final blow came when Sophia presented internal emails from the HOA obtained by subpoena, explicit messages between Victor and Eleanor discussing how to force that ex-Marine to bow down or leave, and add more fines until he breaks. When the closing arguments ended, I felt a strange sense of peace. No matter the result, the truth was out. Sophia patted my shoulder confidently as the judge returned to deliver his verdict. An hour later, we all gathered to hear the decision. "After reviewing all the evidence presented," Judge Peterson began, "this court is faced with a clear case of abuse of power by a private entity against a citizen. My heart began pounding. As for the charges against James Miller for aggravated assault with a firearm, this court finds them unfounded. Mr. Miller acted within the reasonable limits of Texas law in defending his property from intruders. Victor visibly paled. As for the countersuit, the judge continued, this court rules that the Maple Hills HOA and its representatives engaged in a systematic pattern of harassment, intimidation, and attempted illegal appropriation of private property. The judge looked directly at Victor. The court orders Maple Hills HOA to pay Mr. Miller $250,000 in compensatory, moral, and punitive damages. Additionally, I issue a permanent restraining order prohibiting any HOA representative from entering Mr. Miller's property or trying to impose any rules on it. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table as the judge went on. Finally, I order an immediate investigation into the practices of Maple Hills HOA, with the possibility of its dissolution based on the results, and I refer the case for criminal consideration by the district attorney for fraud, coercion, and falsification of public documents. The gavel struck with decisive finality. Sophia beamed and hugged me as murmurs broke out across the room. On the other side, Victor looked like a man whose empire had just crumbled, and that was exactly what had happened. In the following months, big changes followed. The investigation ordered by the judge uncovered extensive abuses by the HOA, not just against me, but against several property owners in the area. Falsified documents, made-up fines, systematic intimidation, everything came to light. For months after our day in court, the Maple Hills HOA was officially dissolved by court order. Victor faced criminal charges for fraud and forgery and eventually accepted a plea deal that included hefty fines, community service, and probation. His career in real estate was over. Eleanor Bloom moved to another state, apparently to live with her daughter, after selling her house well below market value. The residents of Maple Hills formed a new association with limited powers and transparent governance. As for me, I used part of the settlement to completely renovate my house and upgrade the property, not to comply with arbitrary rules, but for my own comfort and enjoyment. The rest, I invested to ensure I'd never have to worry about financial threats to my independence again. 6 months after the trial, I was chopping wood when an old pickup truck pulled up at my driveway. To my surprise, it was Victor Gates. He was unrecognizable compared to the impeccably dressed man who had tried to take my property, his hair disheveled, wearing simple clothes, with deep dark circles under his eyes. "What do you want, Victor?" I asked, holding my axe firmly. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied, the old arrogance completely gone from his voice. "I just came to say I'm moving. Montana. A fresh start." I just nodded. "You ruined my life, Miller," he said, although it didn't have the venom I expected. It sounded more like a statement than an accusation. "You tried to steal mine, Victor. I only defended it." We sat in silence for a moment, with the Texas hill wind blowing between us as the only sound. "You know what's ironic?" he continued. "I really thought I was doing the right thing. Creating order, upholding standards. When you've had power for long enough, you forget there are limits." I rested my axe on a log. "There's a difference between maintaining community standards by mutual consent and trying to force your will on others." Victor looked at my property, now even better maintained than before. "Seems you didn't need our rules after all." "I never did." He nodded slowly, climbed back into his pickup, and left without looking back. I watched the dust rise along the road, thinking about the strange cycle life creates. A man who drove up in a luxury BMW to take my land now leaving in an old pickup, having lost everything. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get more stories like this. That night, I sat on my expanded porch, watching the sunset paint the Texas hills with red and gold. My ranch, my sanctuary, remained untouched, not by luck, but because I decided to defend what's mine, just like generations of Americans before me.